A scan of the arm bone of Quetzalcoatlus shows that, just like those of other pterosaurs, it was hollow. This animal was very lightweight. It may have been the size of a giraffe, but it was no heavier than 2 human beings. But at the very top of the arm, the bone is very different. All these supporting struts line up in one direction. And that gives us a clue as to how the animal got airborne. The upper arms were reinforced so that they could withstand the sudden burst of great power without breaking. The animal used all 4 of its limbs as a giant catapult to launch its body skyward at 35 miles an hour. It used a quadrupedal launch. But how did it actually fly? There is a practical way of finding out. A modern glider is about the same size as that giant pterosaur. It too has long, slender wings, and it too is extremely light. This flying machine is so lightweight it doesn't even need an engine. All it requires is a tow to get it into the air. This is the nearest I will ever get to experiencing the magic of Quetzalcoatlus in flight. With its giant wingspan, this was the largest animal ever to fly. Quetzalcoatlus kept its wing beats to a minimum. It was a living glider. And it had much more detailed control than even the most advanced and sophisticated of modern aircraft.
We are controlling our flight using, at least in part, our tail. However, whereas powered aeroplanes have tails and birds have tails, advanced pterosaurs like Quetzalcoatlus didn't have a tail. So steering must have been much more difficult and would have required very considerable brain power. But there was, people think, a payoff to that, because without a tail, Quetzalcoatlus was even more maneuverable than we are in this.
Quetzalcoatlus doubtless used many of the techniques employed by human glider pilots.
To maintain our height, we need to find a thermal. Those columns of warm air that rise from patches of the landscape that heat well in the sun, like patches of rock. You can tell where they are because white fluffy clouds form at the top of them. And there's one over there, and we're going to have to get to it if we're going to maintain our height.
It's been estimated that by exploiting thermals, Quetzalcoatlus could travel some 10,000 miles in a single flight, and that is almost half the circumference of the entire planet. It might even be that, like some eagles today, these flying giants undertook long migratory journeys every year. And so, 150 million years after they had first appeared, the pterosaurs were at their most spectacular. And then, suddenly, they vanished. A meteor that crashed into Earth 65 million years ago is often blamed for the extinction of the dinosaurs and the pterosaurs. But the truth is that their fate was already sealed millions of years before that moment by the early birds that had been evolving in their shadow. It was the birds that rose from the ashes of that meteor. They occupy all the niches that the pterosaurs once did. So why did birds survive and the pterosaurs die? Birds had one great advantage over the pterosaurs. Their rigid flight feathers meant that their wings had no need to be anchored to either their flanks or their legs. So birds could run and walk and pounce, whatever they needed to do to collect their food in almost any of the land's environments. No pterosaurs, encumbered by their skinny wings, could wade like flamingos. Birds today have evolved into thousands of different species, flying with many different techniques. But it was the pterosaurs that were first into the air. It was they that solved the fundamental problems of flight. And in their prime, they reached a grandeur that the birds still can't match. The dynasty of the pterosaurs lasted over 150 million years. We human beings have only been around for about 2. But only now are we beginning to appreciate to the full the wonders and splendours of those pioneers of flight, the pterosaurs.